G'day jabronis, it is the Verd and welcome back here to Week 2 Power Rankings of the GBA. I'm of course not alone, I'm joined by Aberforth.
Hello.
Alrighty, so we are here for another fun dissection. We really appreciate, I especially appreciated your comments last week. I stand by my rankings and I stand by my ones this week, but I appreciate how passionate the GBA fan base is, and we are hoping that you guys appreciate the rankings again this week. But without further ado, let's get rolling into it. And funnily enough, the bottom 6 teams, we have almost the exact same teams with, I think, like just 2 swapped around down the bottom. So it's getting to this point of the season.
4 swapped around, I think.
No, we got...
Yeah.
So the bottom 6, like, it's shown up there. We got Steel Wings, Rotoms. Yeah, like they're all... The only ones that are different are the Shadows and the Habsols.
Oh, that was fair.
Wild.
Yeah.
So yeah, guys, you'll see, like, going through like the season now, Abe and I will start to have very similar rankings, only because like the teams now, everyone's gravitating towards a certain position. So anyway, let's just break it down. Columbus Chew, obviously, another rough week. The big thing that annoyed me about them in the game, I don't think their prep was that bad. Like, I mean, they tried. It wasn't the best matchup. But the thing that really frustrated me in this game against Crimson was the turn when Mienshao was in against a Kangaskhan that had just gone for Wish, and they were fearing that the Kangaskhan would go for Protect.
Yeah, I had much the same complaints. I'll let you finish it, but that was
basically to kind of summarize it. The Kangaskhan was at pretty much full HP, and Coach Z was worried about a Protect for the high jump kick when the Kofagrigus was on like 10% health. So Mienshao could have quite safely clicked knock off there, knocked out the Kofagrigus, which was a pretty big issue for the rest of Coach Z's team, but instead decided to hard swap out to Ampharos, expecting the Protect, and any momentum that he had in that game was completely gone doing that move as Kofagrigus went back up to 75%, and it was just plays like that that I found very aggravating. Anything else you want to touch on?
No, I'll touch on why I was a little confused as to why that, and why I suddenly started, oh yes, midway through that when we get to Crimson, because there was a similar incident that really annoyed me. But yeah, we'll get there, because it was not a great showing by any means, and he's now lost 2 games in a row. Neither has he played very well, so yeah, I've got him down low. And now to the one position in this bottom 6 where we've got different teams. Do you want to talk about Necro first, or? I mean,
I honestly, I'd really like to hear about your thoughts on Asta.
Well, I've kept Necro the same position at 14, and I've bumped Asta lower. They were, respectively, 13 and 14 last week for me. The reason I bumped Asta lower than I have Necro is, despite the fact that he started from a higher position, I was so disappointed with Asta's prep this week. And not even in a very... I don't think there was any big particular thing he overlooked or anything. I'm just disappointed with the way he's using, in particular, Megalopony. Now, Megalopony, you know what a Megalopony does. It's an offensive monster, it's fast, it's powerful. You use it to break down offensive teams. But it had a really good matchup here. Chimp's best check to it is Uxie, but it doesn't have reliable recovery. And instead of trying to use a set that can offensively pressure Chimp, he brings Cosmic Power Baton Pass into a Metagross that can't Oko a Tapu Bulu, even with a crit. I'm annoyed at how Astra is prepping with such an offensive team, and I know why he brought... I did watch his video. I know why he brought the Cosmic Power. I just disagree with his reasons when he's got things like my Lotic and the Zapdos and the Sylveon on it, which can all essentially deal with what he needed the Lopunny to deal with. And Cosmic Power Passing isn't going to win you a game. You need to kill things in order to win games. And just Cosmic Power Passing isn't going to do that. So I was so frustrated with the prep Asta this week that I bumped him lower. And I just kept Necro the same position, largely because there were points in the game against Tom for Necro that I did actually enjoy the way he played and prepped. I enjoyed the Olin Executor set, for example, and I liked the fact that he was going to try for game with the Lycanroc. But yeah, I had more negatives with Asta's prep than I did Necros this week. So, Asta, prove me wrong. I know that you're better than this, and I'm just disappointed with the way that you're prepping.
Yeah, I think that's why I've got Asta just one thing higher than Steve. Honestly, like, I agree with you. They could literally be in either of these positions, I feel.
Oh, yeah.
My thing is, I have a bit more faith in knowing, like, Asta's pedigree. Like, we've both seen how good he can be, and I have to agree with you wholeheartedly with all of his plays. I think the other big thing that frustrated me watching, like, his battle, because one thing Asta is amazing at is normally reading battles, and he immediately, after seeing foul play on, I think, the Nihilego, assumed that it was a choice set. Now, like, I'm not an expert, but normally, like, if you're running a choice set and the Metagross is that weak, you'd rather just go for a Power Gem, because Nihilego probably knocks out Metagross in that range of the Power Gem, and then at least, you know, it can do some more damage. But then him just being very oblivious to the potential Expert Belt speed boosting set and not realizing why Nihilego was faster than Lopunny, that was a bit of, like, I don't know if that's tilt or whatever, but it was...
That's not paying attention to the screen, essentially. It's not realizing the boost that's been given.
Especially in a Wi-Fi.
And that happens.
It's a huge factor.
That happens a lot. And it happens to me. It happened to me in the D-League as well. And I'm not going to harp on him for missing that. It's a relatively easy thing to miss. And it's not the first time a coach has missed it this season. And we'll get into that later as well.
But yeah,
it's just... Yeah.
I was going to say, I just highlight that as a big factor.
And as a result, I rate him worse.
Yeah. But yeah, other than that, Steve-O, I think, honestly, again, just a pretty rough game against Tom. The Eggy set was a bit better this week compared to, like, he didn't even bring it last week. I'm glad he is bringing it because Eggy is a bit of a... so I remember from last week is because I recommended an Eggy set and he didn't bring it. But I feel he didn't necessarily play too badly. I think he made a few more plays that were better than last week. But I still think, you know, he was just kind of outplayed in this matchup. And when he was already so low in both of our rankings, I feel when other teams below him have picked up wins...
you can't really...
you know what I mean? But anyway, we're going to move on here to the team we have in 13th, which is the San Francisco Giants. Now, I actually really rated Crimson's draft... not Crimson, sorry. Geo's draft week 0. Like, it looked like a really nice draft. I don't know if it's
by the way, guys.
I don't know if it's because he has played two very good players in Chimp and Envy, or what's happened, but like, to his credit,
I think that is largely
yeah, no, you're right, but to his credit, I think he made some fantastic plays in this game against Envy. I think against a lot of other opponents, he probably would have won that matchup, but Envy is just so good at battling that he was able to preserve those win cons. But, you know, Geo was making some really good doubles. After that obvious first turn setback, he was clawing the game back, but just didn't really have enough answers. And I think, you know, his opponent just prepped perfectly for what he was bringing. And the fact of the matter is, again, and like the thing is though that Geo is the highest rated of the 0-2 coaches, so we obviously hold him in a bit of a higher regard because I think...
Well, I was about to say... Sorry,
No, you go. No, by all means, you go.
I have a bit more of an excuse for it because you had him much higher up. But last week, of the teams that lost, he's my highest. The only teams I moved from below one. I genuinely think that he's going to bounce back, and I think he's probably likely to make playoffs, if I'm being honest, because he's played well in both of his games. He's had chances to win potentially in both of his games against Chimp and Envy, who are both incredibly good battlers, and well, I'll get into that one later. But he has played well, and losing to Envy and losing to Chimp, that's not the end of the world. Of the 0-2 teams, he's easily played the best so far, and it was honestly a struggle not to put him among the ranks of the 1-1 teams.
For sure. I think, yeah, next week he's got a very important game, I believe, against Crimson, so it'll be important to see how that matchup goes. But regardless, we're going to move on to the last two teams in our 6th bracket here, which are the Detroit Steel Wings and the Melbourne Rotoms. Both teams are now 1-1. Cybertron getting his first win in a draft league against Joey, who, if I'm being honest, went into this matchup very confidently. Like, he felt very confident that he could deal. And I mean, there was
hacks.
There was hacks.
We can't talk about this game without mentioning
We can't talk about this game without that hurricane confusion.
The confusion, the burn, the sleep talk rolls. There was a lot of hacks, and I feel bad for what I did to Joey, but I'll get into that later on. But Cybertron, he did win against one of the toughest battlers in the league. He is using Rain quite well. He scouted well for the HP Electric turn 1, which I was impressed by. He mitigated the damage the SL Gore did. SL Gore? Yes, that is the right one. I suddenly thought I was saying SL Rock. My apologies. But he played well this game. Even if it did take him hacks to come to win this game, he did play well. He did execute his strategy, and it did work, and Ludicolo ended up coming through. I just hope that we get to see more of him, because I know that he's a very good player, and I'm hopeful that it's going to continue this momentum.
Yeah, he's definitely, I think, getting the hang of this team more. Kind of like how Wolf was. I know we always compare it a lot to it, but this is like Wolf's season in the WBE is about as close as you can compare.
Maybe you compare it to him a lot, but I do.
I don't know. It's just,
I didn't watch most of it.
No, there's very much similarities where, you know, when Wolf was first starting to play, he was like, oh, that's not going to work, or that's, and you know, we were talking about a lot with the first week that he had, that he wasn't really thinking it as through as much, just kind of was in VGC mode, whereas now he's kind of getting into that more draft league mode, and you could see, even though
calcs as well.
Yeah, and it was a much closer game, I feel, and you could see that, like, despite, you know, Joey probably deserving to win, but then again, I guess it makes up for the game against Mono last week. You know, Aaron put himself in a position where he could win, and he did win. So I think, you know, that's Mons. Shit happens. But
yep.
Anyway, we're going to move on to number 11 here, the Detroit Steel Wings. Crimson coming off that rough week 1. Recovering for week 2, however, it's hard to put him higher when you factor in who he played. And I know that's a low blow, but you have to face the reality of it there, guys. Like, it wasn't exactly the toughest matchup for Crimson. And I mean, he did play well, but I feel that it was a game that was really, again, like, this time around, I think I would have been a lot harder on him if he'd lost that game. But, yeah. You know what I mean? So...
I thought he played fine, but when the teams that were above him mostly won, I wasn't willing to move him up higher than this. He played decently. I don't think he played fantastically, but there was nothing wrong with the majority of his plays. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of this, because I obviously had his draft in particular, rated higher than you did at the start.
Yeah. And
I'm looking to be vindicated now. So yeah, keep it up.
That's how I feel with Geo too. I feel like Geo and Crimson are like our two underdogs for the season. Like, we just both want to see him get to playoffs. See what happens. But didn't you say there was like a play that Crimson did that you were going to talk about, or was it just the Kofa Grigas stuff?
Yes, it was Crimson. And it's my big criticism of the game, and part of the reason I didn't move him up higher, but I overlooked it because we already talked about something similar. The turn where he didn't attack the 5% Mega Ampharos with his Kangaskhan, and allowed the Kangaskhan just to rest back up to full.
Yeah.
That turn annoyed
yeah,
me
that
a lot. And that's frustrated a huge amount of me, because Rest Talk Ampharos is a pretty common set. You can tell from the calcs that it's quite bulky. You can probably just expect it to be Rest Talk based on the matchup, because it's a good mon in the matchup, and you have it at about 5% with a mon that you pretty much know is gonna be able to outspeed it, and you don't even try and attack it. That annoyed me. So, yeah, that wasn't great, but hopefully that's not going to happen in the future. And he did come out with the win, so it didn't end up mattering. if he'd lost to that, that would have been I would have had him at the very least in my bottom 2.
Yeah, that is fair enough.
Because that was, in my opinion, a big misplay.
Well, moving on from that, we're going to go to our next grouping. I mean, we could waffle on for ages, but we are going to move on to this next grouping here. I
don't think it goes in groups of like 6 for the.
Yeah, no, the way the GBA does it is they have 6, 4, 3, 3.
Ah, my apologies. I tend to listen to the audio.
Yeah, it's weird. But you know what? We get to,
Don't criticize your own editors.
No, I'm not criticizing. It's because like last time Abe and I did rankings before this, guys. I'm sorry, just to kind of go off on a tangent. Last time we did rankings before this, we had a 4-4-4-4 system, so it was like really easy to follow. You just go.
No, I get why they do. I get why they do it this way because it's it allows us to focus more on the top teams. So yeah. I do understand why. I just had to clarify because I heard you talking about group and that just suddenly...
Yeah. Sorry.
Anyway, let's move on before I show even more about how little I watch my own videos.
So the team that you put in 10th obviously was Joey and the Bronx Bearticks. I put them 9th. Honestly, they could have also been 10th. I felt maybe a little bit bad for Joey. I feel he played the game almost exactly how he wanted to, barring the Gyarados getting confused, because without the confusion and the sleep talk turns, I'm pretty, like, 99.9% confident Joey was going to win that game.
Wow, that low.
Yeah, you know what? There's always that, there's always that icy wind miss chance. You never know, Abe. So,
it wasn't.
I know, but like,
didn't get the
I
confused.
think
it was 100%.
That was just
ignoring hacks. That was 100% a victory. And I just want to clarify a little bit. The reason that I ended up moving him down, I moved him down to. Imagine that you've given a coach a score out of 10. Joey's hasn't changed. It's just that the coaches below him, their scores have increased, and as a result, his is lower in the rankings. It's not me trying to say that he played worse this week or that he deserves to be moved down. Imagine he stayed stationary in terms of an absolute score, but because the teams above him did well and they deserved to go up, he had to go down as a result, and that's just the way that it works sometimes. Sometimes people lose to hacks. I don't want to move him up because he's now in objectively a worse position for playoffs, and it does kind of even out with the mono game as well. So I do feel bad about the fact that he's now my number 10 ranked team, but I didn't want to move the people who were above him who lost down below him, and I couldn't really justify having people like Tom who did win their games stay below him when I did have Tom ranked highly and he did win his game, and yeah, so...
That's fair enough. A team actually that I had lower last week that I've moved up this week despite them losing is the Milwaukee Bears at 10. I could have moved Wolf up higher, but I still think regardless being moved up even after you lose is pretty darn good, so I don't think he's going to be complaining too much. I feel that Wolf, honestly, for a good portion of the game, I'm going to say 70% of the game against Gator, I thought Wolf was going to win. I genuinely think he was making the plays. He knew what he had to do. It was everything right. And there was just 30% where I think we were talking about, there were like 4 times in that game where Wolf just made either the wrong decision or just an unnecessary decision at the time. And, he would either lose a Mon or it would just put him so far back. Like, hard swapping into Bronzong against a Heatran that then went for Flamethrower. Was not great when that was his Mega Altaria check. But at the same time, I feel, again, like we were talking about other games, Wolf was unlucky, because there was obviously the controversy about the Ice Shard at the end of the game, where, according to Calcs, Ice Shard only had like a 37.5% chance to kill from that range, and then Zerk could potentially go back, unless, like, I'm pretty sure... Did Gator say the Mamo was sashed? I'm trying to remember from the team builder or not.
It was sashed, but it was also the 50% berry. So with Ice Shard not critting and not getting the 6 out of 16 roll, it would have activated the 50% berry, so the sash didn't matter. Regardless though, I'll talk briefly about Wolfie because he's in the section too. He's at my number 7. I've kept him the exact same position as he was last week, because this game I felt it was very even and I had Gator rated very highly. and he did end up in a position to win. He was in the position where the roll might have mattered because of a crit drain punch on the Buzzwole. I feel like it'd be remiss to not mention that. So the hacks evened out over the course of the battle, probably. Because without the crit, the Xurkitree had a 1 in 16 chance to KO the Buzzwole, as opposed to what it actually had. But he played well, he prepped well, and I was unwilling to see him lowered because of a game where he came into a bad matchup against one of the guys I had rated higher, and did well, put himself into a decent position, would have won with the aid of hacks, if not for hacks itself. I wasn't comfortable moving him down lower, so yeah.
I will say one last thing for this game, because I'm going to talk about Gator, obviously, because he's my number 7. But probably the biggest turn for me that decided the game...
Why don't we leave the number 7 pick until just at the very end, because then that can segue into my game.
I'll just finish...
a bit closer in rank.
I'll just finish talking just about Wolfie then, because in that battle, there was just probably the biggest turn, in my opinion, was when Wolf decided to go for bulk up against the Altaria instead of Ice Punch, because if he had chosen to go for Ice Punch on that turn, I believe that the ranger was that he would have knocked out the Mega Altaria, and then Buzzwole would have come in, and under Trick Room he could have gone for a bulk up to live the Z Aerial Ace, or whatever the Z move was, and then gone for Drain Punch on the next turn, and allowed Silvally to come in under without Trick Room, and because then he would have known it was Z Buzzwole, he could have gone for Air Slash to knock out the Buzzwole, and then the Silvally had Surf, which would have been able to, feeling like it could have 2-hit KO'd the Mammoth, or he could have even parting shotted first, gone into Zerk, done some things. But I feel like that was the big turn when he decided that bulk up was the play. I just feel like it was those couple of decisions that he made, also like weakening his Zong, that I wanted to put Wolfie higher because he played so well despite all his mistakes, but there were clear mistakes that
but
he
you
made.
did make the mistakes.
Exactly. Yeah.
By the way, guys, welcome to Theory Modding with Verd.
I'm just saying, it makes sense. I thought about that play after that game for like a solid half an hour, and I'm like, if he just clicked Ice Punch, I'm pretty sure he had it.
Exactly, it took you half an hour.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Alright, we're moving on. So the next team, would you like to talk about the New Orleans Pelipers that you have at number 9?
Sure. John played Mono this week. Mono and played well. He ended up coming through with the Snorlax. I don't think that... I've moved him down for much the same reason I moved Asta down last week. I felt like Mono had the control throughout most of this game, and I was disappointed to see that with John, given how highly I do rate John as a battler. I moved him down significantly. I actually didn't realize it was that significant until I was looking through these rankings again, because I thought I'd only move him down 1 or 2, but then I couldn't justify having some people below him, such as Wolfie, who I did think played well for the majority of the match. So he's kind of my number 8. I feel like my numbers like 10 through about 7 could be interchanged within themselves, by the way, guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, John didn't play his best this week. I'm hoping that he bounces back next week when he's not against Mono, and doesn't have to face the Snorlax again, because Curselax is always a nightmare to deal with.
And it's one of Mono's favourite sets too. Like,
yes,
he loves that.
That's the other thing. You've got to know your opponent. You've got to know what their sets are and what sort of things they'll bring. But maybe he just didn't have time to fully see that Mono loves Curselax.
Yeah.
Which isn't exactly something that you can easily see. I mean, you and I both know because we both know Mono quite well.
That is true.
So
yeah.
Maybe it's just the case that there isn't that much evidence for it, and people wouldn't realize it because they just don't know him enough. Whereas we've been friends for about 2 years now, so I do know what sort of sets he likes.
Moving on now to our number 8, and we both have the San Jose Sharpedos now.
Did you talk about Joey?
Did I talk about who?
Joey.
Yeah, I talked about Joey. I said that his prep was good, but he was undone by the hacks.
Yes,
basically.
you did.
Yeah,
my apologies.
We talked about it first. Yeah, it's all good.
Yes.
So San Jose Sharpedos. Now Tom's moved down a little bit.
We need to do this in a better order, by the way.
I
dude.
know.
We're jumping all over the place, from 10th
fine.
to 7th to 8th to 9th to 8th.
It's
So I thought we missed out your number 9. My apologies.
It's all good. So the San Jose Sharpedos in 8. Obviously, like I said, I've moved them down a bit. You've moved them up. I think the reason I just moved Tom down was not necessarily because I think he played bad. I just felt that a lot of the other teams just
played better.
And like of the teams that are 1-1 that are above him, I just felt that they were stronger than he was at this point. I definitely think this game was a big improvement to week 1. I think that, you know, he was able to manage his mons a lot better, and a lot of his plays weren't as like linear as you were saying last week. The Z move on Lando was massive, as it was able to get rid of the Rotom, which was annoying, and his play around the Alolan Exeggutor was actually really solid as well, because Trick Room Eggy or even a sub Alolan Eggy is going to be really difficult to deal with, so props to him for playing around that. And I mean, it's going to be interesting. He's got John next week, which will be a very interesting game between those two, but is there anything else you want to touch on from Tom's perspective?
Well, I'll just say briefly, this is the benefit of doing massive changes week 1, because I can now move people up when they win. Yeah, Tom played well. I moved him up as a result. He did play less linearly, and I was a fan of the Lando sets. I was a fan of how he handled the Exeggutor. I was impressed by his managing, especially of the Exeggutor. I was impressed with his managing of most of the game. And I liked the fact that he wasn't being stupid with differential, is my technical name for it, in terms of, I'm glad he's not willing to risk the game for the sake of differential as he would have if he'd switched out his Lando on the Lycanroc, which is something I think coaches do more towards the end of the season when they need differential, but in situations where they can get an extra differential point game, I've seen a couple coaches, not just in the GBA, risk the game for differential, and I don't like that, so I was impressed by that as well. So that's just my extra little thing to add to that. And now feel free to talk about Gator and Florida.
You know, it's that time of the video where all the Gator fanboys are like hovering over their keyboards ready to go.
You're not making it better.
I'm sorry. Okay, look, obviously last week people weren't pleased with my Gator rankings. I have to move him up this week because he did win again, and there were portions of that game against Wolf where he did play well, and a lot of people are going to ask me like, well, why isn't he in like the top 3 or something, because he's 2-0, he's got one of the best records. The thing is that there's a difference between being 2-0 and playing really well, and being 2-0 where like your first game was alright, but just
keep digging.
No, like I'm generally.
You're digging, only getting deeper. I don't mind. I'm not one to talk.
I don't mind. Like the thing is, basically, I think Gator is a perfectly fine battler, but I don't think he's better than the other 6 guys that I put above him right now. Despite him being 2-0, I haven't been as big a fan of like the plays he makes. I think against Wolf, he was very lucky to come out with a win in that game. I think that.
Well, I already covered like the Drain Punch crit meant that he would have been unlucky to lose it.
But at the same time, like if Wolf had played properly, then we wouldn't have had to theory.
And ifs and buts.
I know. Like the thing is, so I put him higher. He is in the top half now, and honestly, if he keeps on improving, I will keep putting him higher. But I just wasn't convinced in his game against Wolf to put him higher than a lot of other teams. That's how I'm going to leave it. But anyway. You can now talk about
I'll talk about him now and completely undermine what I said about moving people up after they win, because I've actually moved them down too. So yeah, essentially this is just because it's the exact same case as Joey. His overall score, like pretend it's like an 8 out of 10 or whatever, and maybe 9 out of 10. His overall score has stayed the same. It's just that teams above him, teams that were below him won in a manner that I was willing to raise their score higher than his, and the teams above him that lost, I think it was only one team above him, the 2 teams above him that I had lost, but one's far below him now. The team above him that did lose, I felt didn't deserve to be thrown completely under the bus, so he moves down to more because of the strengths of other coaches than any weakness of his own. I do think Wolf had quite a bit of control in their match, and I feel like the right result occurred given the Drain Punch crit, but it was a close one, and given the matchup that they had, I did think it was a bit too close for me to justify keeping him at number 4. over the performances of some of the other coaches that we saw this week. So yeah.
Fair enough. The number 6 team I have is Tampa Bay Luxray. Probably could have moved Mono a bit higher potentially, judging on how well that he played. I'm putting it more down to one of those games as well, though, where it was more just kind of Mono clicked the Snorlax button, and that was about it. So I didn't want to put him too high because it wasn't necessarily like a massive win of skill. It was more just he had one Pokemon, very good in the matchup. His opponent didn't prep that well for it. It took advantage, which is something that happens in a lot of games. And I'm still going to move him up because he deserves to be higher because he really should be 2-0 right now. But it's definitely more positive signs from Mono, and it's good to see that despite what happened last week, he just brushed himself off and just took John to town. So I have him at 6. Obviously, it might be a bit weird me having John higher than Mono, judging on that result, but because I had John so high, and I guess it's the same thing as you were saying with Gator, was the fact that you had Lars higher than Gator, and then like even though Lars lost, it's the same thing with John. Even though John lost, but like even though John lost, I don't want to plummet him too low. I feel like that's not like, sure, he had one bad week where he didn't bring like the best prep, but that doesn't mean that he should be like completely shunned out of the rankings. I've dropped him down a few places there. I feel like if he doesn't perform again next week, it's going to be even further, especially since he's playing Tom, where if he loses that game, then it could be very, he goes then to 1 and 2, which is not exactly a great place to be.
Yeah.
I feel just some of his prep was a bit weird. The Houndoom set was a bit odd. I get what its premise was, but at the same time, as you would know from the NPL last year, I mean, you didn't have a Weavile, you had a Sneasel, but still, like, Piloswine is a very, very good wall. Even without an Eviolite, it is a big boy, and it can take a lot of hits, and I feel like the Doom set then really suffered, because if it was, say, like a Superfang or Raw set, then it could have been maybe more effective for the Lax, but he just didn't bring enough to deal with Snorlax, and that was obviously the big kind of issue for John that made him out losing. So I'm just saying he got beat, and it was a Mon that he couldn't really counter, and like you said, next week he's not playing a Snorlax, so maybe he'll recover and do fine, but for me, he's sitting at number 5. We'll see what happens.
Apologies if that cough remains in, by the way. Yeah, we'll see what happens in the magic of editing. Yeah, I'll talk about Lars then. I had Lars as my number 1, and he just got out prepped this week in a way that I was not willing to move him too low. If someone's my number 1, I have faith in them. I'm expecting him to do well, and I'm not gonna. I fully expect Lars with the team he has and the skill that he's got to make playoffs, to be in contention, to maybe even win the full thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to drop him very low for losing, and I see you very much agree with me, given that you've only got one position higher. But the reason I'm not going to plummet him much, especially him over Gator, which is one that I was struggling with in prep for this week. First of all, I had him my number 1 last week. I have a lot of faith in him. I'm not willing to lower him too much. And second of all, I don't think that this was a weakness of him in prep. I think that this was more his opponent prepping brilliantly, as opposed to him having a weakness in prep. And there is a difference there. It's a difference between overlooking a threat and having someone innovate on you. And I'm more willing to punish the former as opposed to the latter. So yeah, Lars stays in my top 5. And I'm thinking he's going to stay around the top 5 area for the rest of the season, essentially.
You have Jolt at number 4.
Speaking of great innovation, I have Jolt at number 3. You have him higher, actually. I have Jolt at number 4. My apologies, I misspoke. I have Mono at number 3. We'll get into Mono in a minute, though. I can only say, Jesus Christ, that prep. If anyone is willing to hold up their hand alongside me and admit that they didn't actually know that Nature Power did that in Misty Terrain, feel free. I legitimately had no clue it did that until watching his video. That's just excellent prep. and it paid off really well. So congratulations, Jolt. You did a good job. I've moved you up. You're in the top 4 now. And
yeah, I will talk about Jolt a little bit later
good
on,
friends with Jolt, and I'm expecting
just
him
covering
to do
Lars
really
again,
well with this.
I think that,
with
yeah,
this
like you
draft
said,
this season.
Lars didn't necessarily play it badly. It was just Jolt's prep was so good. The one turn, though, that really was annoying with Lars, and like he admitted it too, was when the Nature Power first went off with the Moonblast, and he said again, like, with that, he looked away and didn't see the special attack drop and left the Kyurem in, which obviously if he didn't do that, he might have put himself into a bit more of an advantageous position, because Kyurem, obviously, as Jolt was kind of covering, was a big issue for Jolt's team, so being able to kind of get rid of it that easily was a bit of a blessing for Jolt. So I think just that play in general, something that Lars just maybe needs to focus on more, is just really paying attention, because it's a super important thing.
Most especially because this is the second week in a row that something similar has happened. He didn't exactly not pay attention last week, but he timed out, which is not paying attention to the time. And like it is something that he needs to make sure doesn't become a recurring problem. I'll briefly explain why I've got Mono as high as I do as well. Mono I have as high as I do because essentially if we're going by chances, in all but 5% of situations, he's now 2-0. He didn't play really well. He played well this week. His opponent misprepped, and he took advantage of that with one of his more favored sets. But given the strength of his performance against Joey as well, I feel like he deserves to be in top 3, especially given that he had such a good draft. I had him at number 1 in the post-draft power rankings. He's done really well so far in terms of his play, even though he only has 1 win, and I'm expecting that that 1 loss to stay at a 1 loss.
So I've got Chimp up in 3rd place. He's been gradually moving up. I think, you know,
I'll let you talk about
the
Chimp
first week was a bit rough again with him as well, but this week, just watching his game against Asta, and granted we were saying Asta hasn't been, you know, playing the best, but at the same time, I think that, you know, Chimp just played out of his skin. Like, everything he did, all the prep, everything he wanted to do just worked out perfectly. I think early game, being able to cripple the Milotic with the Greninja set, which basically meant that it didn't even really hit the field, but the fact that, like, literally nothing was coming in against Banditini once Milotic went down, like, even Darmanitan, like, Darmanitan is not a V-Create switch-in. Don't get it twisted, guys. It is not a V-Create switch-in. And he just handled everything really well. He knew how good the Nihilego set was going to be in the matchup, and just put himself in a position where Nihilego could just win. The turns around the Metagross are interesting. That was another note with Asta. Not bringing Bullet Punch on Metagross was a very interesting call, given your opponent had, you know, a Nihilego. Or even, like, I could understand it maybe like an Assault Bear set with Pursuit, because then you could have really taken advantage of some things. But regardless, I think that, you know, Chimp just played that game perfectly. There's not really much else I can say about it. I think, you know, the team, although on, like, paper we were a little bit iffy on it, I think the team is now showing its worth.
He's using it well. So credit to him. He's proving a bad draft wrong. Not a bad draft wrong. He's proving us wrong about his draft being bad. And yeah, I actually have him at number 2. We'll move into the number 2 slide now as well. I have him. Have we? Well, you're the one editing, and I don't know. So, frankly, I'm gonna take what I can get. Anyway, yeah, I have him at my number 2. He's played really subtly, really well. I think I covered it last week as well. There hasn't been a turn in his games where he hasn't had really good control, if not complete control. Even when he's losing a Pokemon like he did with Tapu Bulu against Metagross, it's because he's setting himself up and positioning himself to completely sweep through his opponent with one of his later mons. He played really well. He crippled the Milotic, as you already covered, and credit where credit's due. He's done really well with a draft that I didn't expect to do as well as it has. I'd still like to see a couple changes being made to it, but that's just minor nitpicks compared to the way he's been using it. And I'm expecting him to do really well in the rest of the season. He's now 2-0
I want to see more
and
Camel.
playing well, and
Not enough.
it's just I feel like it's just going to continue because he's shown no signs of stopping.
3 out of 10, not enough Camel. But anyway, I'm going to move on to my number 2.
I want to see less Mega
Jolt.
Camel. If you never bring that,
I just felt that, you know, Jolt's first week wasn't super convincing. Like, he got the result. It was a bit hairy at the end. But this week, you know, you were talking about players like Chimp and Envy, who obviously we'll talk about in a second, who just never looked like they were in a bad spot. And that was basically Jolt this week. From the get-go, he had a very clear plan. And granted, Lars didn't exactly play the best, but he still is a very high-caliber opponent, and Jolt just played out of his skin. Like, I've seen Jolt play for a long time, and that might be one of the best battling performances I've seen him do. The triple scarf was amazing. Definitely caught him off guard. Not bringing Breloom, which Lars fully expected to be brought, was also really smart, because it forced Lars to prep a bit more for that than some other things on Jolt's team, quite clearly. And the cherry on top had to be that very spicy struggle kill at the end of the game, which was just like the best. That was very enjoyable to watch. And I mean, all credit to Joel. This was just a week where he put in that incredible prep, and the reason I guess why I have him above Chimp is just because I already had Jolt 4 spots above Chimp last week, so I didn't feel it was validated to jump Chimp leapfrogging Jolt. I think Jolt's played well enough. Like, the first week he did fine enough, and then this week he's just reaffirmed my faith in him. Next week he has Joey though, so big test for him, but honestly, the way that he's playing, I'd actually back Jolt to win that game. But we are going to move on to
well, I'll just briefly say I might well have been harsh on not having Jolt in my top 3. I feel like that was more based on the strength of Mono's performances as well. Honestly, I do think that I think that you'll agree with me here. Our numbers 2 to 4 could pretty easily be swapped around. Not just
right now
not just number 2 and 4. Any in that.
It's still very early days. Like, you've got teams that are 2-0, teams that are 1-1, teams that are 0-2 right now. And the more the season progresses, the more that kind of division will get shown. You're starting to see it now, but but it's good now having those points of difference, I feel. But the one point of difference we definitely don't have is at the top.
For you guys.
The guy that I had at number 1 last week has reaffirmed his place at the top, and you've decided to jump on the bandwagon too, moving him up a spot. I mean, I think the big thing about this game, like I said when I was talking about Geo,
praise
Geo
him
played
as I wouldn't say
really
it,
well.
or shall I?
Like, that was honestly one of Geo's best battling performances. He read all the plays, and Envy still beat him.
Got manhandled.
That is the definition of just like GG. It's Envy, because like first turn reading that the Mega Sizzle was going to come in and blowing that shit back with HP Fire was beautiful. And then the most important thing I think he did in the game was the prep that he had on Mega Pinsir, to the point where if Ditto copied it, it couldn't touch Empoleon, was brilliant. Like, knowing that you had to check for Ditto stealing something, very, very good. And then the big thing too was preserving Pinsir in that game, because it was his win con, and so many times, you know, we were talking about it, where players don't really think through that late game win con, or that, you know, big issue they have with their team, whereas Envy, he knows that. And despite the game being incredibly back and forth with Geo, he never gave Geo that big chance to get rid of Pinsir, and with Pinsir still around, it could easily clean up at the end and give him the game. So, you know, battle management was really good, his prep was phenomenal, and then obviously the plays that he made were just brilliant. And right now, I mean, like, he for me is quite easily the front runner. Like, Jolt and Chimp and that, they're doing quite well, but yeah.
I excluded number 1 when I said 2 and 4 can be interchangeable. Yeah. I mean, I held out for 1 week, but I mean, GG, it's Envy. Envy played brilliantly. My only gripe is that he's still using that awful defogger, but alas. I'm not going to hold out on that. I'm a little less impressed with the pincer prep than you are because, well, largely because I'm an Ubers player at heart, and Ditto is everywhere on the ladder. So frustration versus return mind games have been a thing that don't really impress me for a long time now. But what impressed me was, as you said, Geo played really well, but being able to read the plays and actually being able to do anything about them is a big difference. And MB just prepped and played in such a way where even when his opponent knew what he was going to do, it didn't matter because he had the game.
Do it, guys, for week 2 of the Power Rankings. We hope you have enjoyed.
So, yeah,
if you have enjoyed, make sure
well
you like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the GBA channel and check out all the coaches that are a part of the GBA. And if you'd like to, again, we'd really appreciate if you commented letting us know what you think about our rankings, what maybe you would rank the teams as. We just want like a healthy discussion in the chat, guys, because obviously
Can you tell he's a bit salty about being the only one that was getting shit thrown at him? I'll just have to. I want to say something here. I criticized last week. Mind blown. It doesn't work the way I said it did. I should have looked that up. I just want to hold my hands up and admit that I made a mistake. Again. With mechanics. So don't expect me to talk about mechanics much, because I've clearly demonstrated twice now this season.
Anyway, that's it for us. We hope you have enjoyed. We will be back again same time next week. So look forward to the games this upcoming week, and go check out all the other analyst videos, by the way, because everybody does an amazing job. But this is Abe and Verd, and we'll catch you next week for more Power Rankings.